2020 has been a lot so far, hasn't it? I mean, there's a global pandemic raging. There are devastating wildfires that come with choking air. There's the loss of jobs and income. There's the ongoing trauma of racial disparities in our nation. And then some of us attempted to watch the first presidential debate. No small number of people have called this season apocalyptic, and I get it. But sometimes we turn to humor in seasons of difficulty, and I have genuinely enjoyed the various memes that people have passed along to me. Images of absurdities that would have felt unimaginable before this year. This week, I felt like I was living in my own 2020 meme. Now, some of you may know, I have long been very focused on order and cleanliness in my life. It's just the person that I've become. And believe me, I've spent a significant amount of time unpacking it with my therapist. But all that to say, I'm the kind of person who dreamed for years of getting my ideal vacuum cleaner. And then it actually happened. Last Christmas, my wonderful family members all pitched in and gifted me the perfect Dyson. For all these months since Christmas, and especially during the long pseudo-quarantine months of COVID, our house has been vacuumed from top to bottom every single day. This, for me, is living the dream. Honestly, my biggest hesitation when we were thinking about bringing home our puppy Hazel was about cleanliness. Would I be able to maintain the space in a way that felt sanitary and life-giving to me? That's no small question for me. But we decided to take the plunge. And we've been so proud of our good girl in the first week. She came home so polite, apparently potty trained, cuddly, and not even very sheddy. And then 2020. My ultimate nightmare became a reality. Hazel had her one and only accident inside. But we didn't know it right away. It was concealed in a particularly distracting rug pattern. And I thoroughly vacuumed like every day. Maybe you've seen the Roomba stories. You can imagine the scene. Hazel's little indiscretion was spread evenly over a 10 square foot area. And what's more, it entirely clogged every crevice of the Dyson torque drive to an unsalvageable extent. I was physically sick to my stomach for the 4 hours of disinfecting, and then for probably 8 hours afterwards. But then I thought, of course, I just vacuumed fresh dog poop with my most prized possession. It's 2020. And I guess if you can see your life as a meme, you know it's going to be okay. This is a story that is maybe funny in retrospect, but I know that the challenges of these times are mostly not very funny. This week, I read about a large survey that was undertaken recently by a well-known Christian research group, and it found that in this season of the coronavirus pandemic, over 50% of pastors surveyed in the United States had seriously considered making a career change at some point in the last 6 months. The reasons were all over the board, but mostly it was a combination of the seemingly insurmountable organizational challenges combined with the impossibility of making everybody feel happy and well in a time where we just can't. Now, I trust that the vast majority of those pastors who were surveyed won't actually follow through on such a monumental shift, but it certainly sheds some light on the great distress and anxiety that individuals and groups are experiencing in this moment. There's a sense that something is just not right. And there's a struggle at the same time to live normally as if everything is just fine when it's just not. If this is true for pastors, it is certainly true for others as well. You know, sometimes I think that as these months wear on, we tend to forget just how disruptive this season is because the newness of it has worn off. But the truth is, we're all carrying a very heavy load, and it comes from numerous causes. But the pervasiveness all around us and in us right now sometimes makes it difficult for us to pinpoint why we feel how we feel at any given moment. But let me just say, I see you. I see the struggle because I feel it too. Life isn't back to normal because it can't be yet. There are circumstances that are just outside of any of our control. And when you live like that for a long period of time, it takes a toll on our bodies and spirits and minds. But God sees, God knows, and God cares. These are moments, I think, when one of the most powerful gifts that we can give, truly one of the most profound ministries that we can engage in, is the giving of encouragement and demonstrating a generosity of spirit toward one another and toward every single person we encounter. And I just want to say thank you sincerely to the 2 different people who are not my wife, who gave me the gift of a compliment or a word of appreciation this week. It matters so much to me. It matters to everyone. And in those moments, I sensed the life of Christ at work. In a world that is overflowing with anxieties and criticisms on all sides and from all parties, surely Christ is calling us right now to be different, to be those set-apart tribes who are not like the encounter between Samson and the Philistines that we read about last week. We are called to genuinely reflect some kind of substantive difference when compared to the broader waters that we swim in. And it strikes me, especially this week, that in moments of great cultural turmoil and unsettledness, this might just be one of our greatest opportunities to demonstrate a life and a faith in practice. And church, I see you doing it. Well done, good and faithful servants. I read a short teaching this week. It's called Do It Anyway. And the story goes that this was hung in Mother Teresa's own bedroom in Kolkata. These are words that reflect the grit and the grace of God's people, and certainly words that she lived by. I'll read them now, and may these be a word of encouragement to you as you walk the path of Christ this week. It says, "People are often unreasonable, irrational, and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you are kind, people may accuse you of selfish or ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. If you are successful, you will win some unfaithful friends and some genuine enemies. Succeed anyway. If you are honest and sincere, people may deceive you. Be honest and sincere anyway. What you spend years creating, others could destroy overnight. Create anyway. If you happen to find serenity or happiness, some may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good that you do today will often be forgotten. Do good anyway. Give the best that you have, and it will never be enough. Give your best anyway. In the final analysis, it is between you and God. It was never between you and them anyway." These are words that certainly reflected St. Teresa's life. But also, I think they're a pretty good paraphrase of the teachings of Jesus himself. Be encouraged on this path, my friends. Even when you feel like you're at the end of your rope, you plant the seeds of the kingdom of God on earth as it is in heaven, and it will not be for nothing. This encouragement from Teresa also reminds me of our text this week as we continue to walk through the whole story of the Bible. We've arrived now at the book called 1 Samuel, and it's a pivotal moment in the narrative of God's people on earth. The message in this era of Israel's history, as we've read it, becomes even more powerful in this text when we apply it to our life today. Because what we find here is a temptation to act just like everyone else in the surrounding culture and to forget that we have been called to be something different. Remember that as we read in the book of Judges, at this point in Israel's history, they have been living in their promised land for 300 and some odd years. And all the time, they've been struggling to feel like it's really their home. They act just like all the other tribes around them. And the result is constant war, constant struggle for power and possession, and a whole lot of death and dissatisfaction as a result. All this time in the land so far, they have been ruled not by a king, but by tribal chiefs called judges. And now the book of 1 Samuel tells us the story of the last judge of Israel, the good and righteous Samuel, and the decision of the people as a mass to abandon this way of life and try to become like all the other nations around them. We read in 1 Samuel chapter 8, "All the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah, and said to him, 'You are old, and your sons do not follow your ways. Appoint for us then a king to govern us just like the other nations.' But this thing displeased Samuel when they said, 'Give us a king to govern us.' Samuel prayed to the Lord, and the Lord said to Samuel, 'Listen to the voice of the people in all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you. They have rejected me from being king over them. Just as they have done to me from the day I brought them up out of Egypt to this day, forsaking me and serving other gods. So now also they are doing it to you. Now listen, only you shall solemnly warn them, show them the ways of the king who shall reign over them.' So Samuel tells them this will be a disaster. And then we read, 'The people refused to listen to the voice of Samuel. They said, "No, but we are determined to have a king over us, so that we may be like other nations, and that our king may govern us and also go out before us and fight our battles." Sometimes in biblical teaching, I've heard this era of Israel's history framed as a choice between two different kinds of government. The story goes that God chose for them to be ruled by tribal judges, but then the people rejected that and they chose a monarchy instead. God wanted one form of government, the people chose another form of government. But as I've read these books again this month, I'm not so convinced that's the main plot line here. It seems to me to be an oversimplification of the text, to suppose that this is all about the kind of government God desires. I think it's more fruitful to us instead to look at the dynamics of what's going on in the heart of the people throughout this season, because that's what ties this story to our own. As I've insisted over the last few weeks, the history of God's people is all about the concept of arriving in a promised land. And each and every one of us, you and me, is longing for a promised land, a new place or a new set of circumstances that we believe will make us feel settled at last. Israel's hopes were placed in a literal, physical land. The dream of arriving in Canaan was the dream of finally being at peace, finally being at home. And I've suggested that for each one of us, we should take some time to really query our own souls and ask ourselves, what is the Canaan that I'm dreaming of? What is the imaginary set of circumstances out there in the future on the horizon that is driving my life in a day-to-day way? Because we've all got a Canaan on our mental horizon. But I hope it's become abundantly clear in the text so far. Arriving in the land didn't translate into peace and settledness for the Hebrew people. Their wars remained. Their unsettledness persisted. And they began a centuries-long tit-for-tat battle with the other occupants of the land. One side would offend the other and then revenge was required, and the cycle was unbroken. It's a trap that we all fall into if we're not actively seeking the Lord's heart in prayer. So when the people were ruled by judges, they weren't happy. They weren't very righteous. And so on its surface, it doesn't seem like transferring their governmental system from judges to a monarchy really would matter that much. The thing is, in both scenarios, the people would be unsettled and embattled with others. It's not because of the form of government. It's because they were still playing by the rules of the nations around them. Listen to what the people say to Judge Samuel at the end of his life. We are determined to have a king over us so that we may be like other nations, and that our king may govern us and go out before us to fight our battles. They have persisted in missing the point, whether it is under judges or kings, because their goal is to be powerful and somehow to win. We want someone to fight our battles. We want to be influential like the other nations that we see. We want to beat this world at its own game. Well, spoiler alert, the people didn't find their paradise in the land, regardless of whether it was under judges or kings. We, you and I, do not enter our promised land, regardless of how we restructure the circumstances of our lives. The promised land, the kingdom of God, is not entered by force or by replicating the patterns of the world. For us as followers of Jesus, this has powerful implications in the season that we find ourselves in today. I've heard it said that on a national scale, the most important thing is to gain enough power to be able to impose our will to create life and justice. That the end will justify whatever means we take to get there. That maybe we can stomach some undesirable qualities in a person as long as we can get enough votes. Because we have a promised land to build, and that's just how it works in the real world, right? I've seen it on a global scale, on a national scale. I've seen it even in individual lives. I've seen it in my own heart when I'm not careful. I'm trying to reach a promised land for myself, which might look something as humble and as small as desiring to have a close community, desiring a relationship, wanting to be loved, wanting to feel significant. And with that passionately held dream in mind, I might sometimes be willing to take some shortcuts to the promised land, maybe by flattery or by gossip or by whatever it might be. Danny calls it trying to hotwire connection with people. Maybe sharing a little something that you know you really shouldn't, but you'll get it in with that person. Whether it's at the scale of a nation or an individual life, the dynamic is fundamentally the same. In God's story, as we're learning to see it, we acknowledge that we all are dreaming of an arrival at some place. But we read that we will never be settled in the land, we'll never find the thing we're looking for, as long as we are trying to achieve that dream using the same methods as the rest of the world. Our life under kings will be just as unsatisfying as our life under judges, if our heart is trying to find a way to win battles or to fight enemies. What better season than this one right now? To be God's people in the midst of an anxious world, demonstrating to all who see us that there is another way to reach the promised land. We read from the teachings of Jesus in Matthew chapter 5. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up to the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him, and he began to speak, and he taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you, even when people revile you and persecute you, or utter all kinds of evil against you on my account. Rejoice and be glad. Your reward is great in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. You are the light of the world. A city that is built on a hill cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a bushel basket, but on a lampstand so that it can give light to the whole house. In the same way, in the season of coronavirus, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. Amen.